Good morning to all. Today we are going to discuss in Unit 1. The topic is types of data. The types of data, the course outcome of this topic is explain the fundamental concept of GIS. This will be joined with PO1 and PO5. Then PSO1. The outcome of this topic is the fundamental concept of GIS. So see the representing spatial element. This is the raster data in grid based. This is the vector data like point, line, polygon. This is the real world. Data in GIS, spatial and non-spatial. In the spatial, vector, raster, and then tin. Under the vector, point, line or polyline, then polygon. Whereas raster in grid and images. The spatial third category is tin. From non-spatial, the nominal are categories, ordinary or rank based, interval, ratio, cyclic, counts and amount. So only we have two type of data in the GIS. One is the spatial data, second one is the non-spatial data. Types of data. A geodatabase is a database that is in some way referred to locations on the earth. GIS data can be separated into two categories: spatially referenced data, which is represented by vector and raster form, including imagery, and attribute tables, which is represented in tabular format. Within the spatial reference data group, the GIS data can be further classified into two different types: vector and raster. So, like a geographic data, spatial and vector data. Spatial and raster data. In the vector, point, line, polygon, raster, grid and imagery. Geographic data, another one is attribute data. Every houses, every tree, every city has its own unique latitude and longitude coordinates. The two primary types of spatial data are vector like a discrete and raster like a continuous data. The discrete versus continuous data. A second subdivision of these values assigned to each cell are the values representing discrete or continuous data. The discrete data, sometimes called categorical data, most often represent object. This object usually belong to a class, for example soil type, a category, for example land use type, or a group, for example political party. The discrete data is best represented by ordinal or nominal numbers. The continuous data, a continuous raster data sets or surface can be represented by a raster with floating point values, referred to as a floating point raster dataset, or occasionally by integer values. The value for each cell in the dataset is based on a fixed point such as sea level, a compass direction, or the distance of each location from a phenomenon in a specified measurement system, such as the noise in describable monitored at various sites near an airport. The vector data is not made up a grid of pixel. Instead of vector graphic are comprised of vertex and paths. The three basic symbols types for vector data are point, line, and then polygon, like an areas. The point vectors are simply xy coordinates. Generally, they are a latitude and a longitude with a spatial reference frame. In this case, maps often use points to display cities, whereas in lines, vector lines connect each vertex with a path, basically connecting the dots in a set of order, and it becomes a vector line with each dot representing a vertex. For example, map shows rivers, roads, and pipelines as vector lines. Polygon. When user join a set of vertex in a particular order and close it, this is now a vector polygon feature. In order to create a polygon, the first and the last coordinate pair are the same. For example, a building footprint as a square footage and agricultural field have acreage. So the types of GIS files, vector and raster. Types of vector file, point, line, and then polygon. So see from the feature, example restaurant like a point, then a line like a road, polygon is a countries. So the attributes from that: restaurant address, types of food. Then attributes for the road, length, speed limit are mentioned. From attributes of the countries like a population and then GDP. Then second one is the raster data. Raster data is having two types. One is the grid types data, another one is the image type data. They are usually regularly spaced and square. Rasters often look pixelated because each pixel has its own value or class. Now, each cell in case of grid we call as a cell, in case of image we call as pixel. So, each cell will represent one attribute, one value. It may be in case of remote sensing data, it may be reflection value, it may be emitted value, it may be temperature value, or in normal case may be a rainfall value or any other value, but only single value per cell or per pixel. So see the raster representation of data, like in grid, the small box are represented. The difference between image and grids. So the image is a unit value like pixel, then cell is called a cell. Whereas the value of the image is only positive integers, whereas the cell is both positive and then negative integers. The image for value is only the positive integers, whereas the cell are both positive and negative integers. The pixel value for a grayscale and color images, the pixel value is a single number that represent the brightness of the pixel. The most common pixel format is the byte image, where this number is stored as an 8-bit integer giving a range of possible values from 0 to 255. Typically, 0 is taken to be black and 255 is taken to be white. To represent color images, separate red, green and blue RGB components must be specified for each pixel. 24-bit integer 255, 255, 255. The pixel value we can represent it in the grid based like a square box. So see the pictures are represented into black and white box, then it will be represented into integer values. The difference between vector and raster. So this is the most commonly the differentiation of the vector and raster structure. The data structure per vector is complex and the raster is simple, whereas easy of learning is difficult in software is complex, whereas this one is the easy. The positional precision can be very precise and accurate in the vector structure. The precision increased with increases data storage in the raster structure, whereas the attribute precision good for polygon, line and point data, not good for continuous data in the vector structure, whereas good for continuous data structure in the raster. Why? Because it is an grid based. The analytical capability good for spatial query analysis limit to intersections, whereas not good for spatial query but good for spatial analysis and filtering. The storage requirement relatively small but complex in the vector structure, relatively large and simple but may be complex in the raster structures. Cost is inexpensive. From here raster structure is expensive. Output map quality very good, look like a map, but here very poor in the raster structures. Where ability to work with image data, poor data can be vectorized first and then it is a good. So the assessment part of this session is attributes data are one type of spatial data, whether it's a true or false. Three basic kind of vector entities are. So kindly fill the assessment part of the session, gain the knowledge. These are the reference material. Thank you.